number, first 6, last 4, date and time of purchase, amount, auth code. Any transaction, yeah.
Now tell us what you do when you get physical tapes.
Physical tapes, all right.
Burn
Physical
them?
tapes.
Have rats eat them? That's PCI compliant, right?
Yeah. So I've heard 2 stories. The story that's bad, that I would say is way too much work and not worth your time, is going back and restoring the tapes and then rebacking them up and scrubbing the data. That's ridiculous. I mean, you know, right? That's painful. Like, how would you do that? That's going to be years of time, okay? Doesn't make sense to do that. What I would do is I would put them in a facility like an Iron Mountain and slowly start moving these tapes out. And get rid of the ones you really don't need. Like, what value, really, what value is a tape that's 3 years old to anybody here in this room? Can anybody give me a legitimate reason other than like a court case that's mandating that you keep it? Because law is going to trump PCI. Yeah.
Sure. Some industries you have billing. So in our case, our billing data is even done with the same records that store the cardholder data.
Yeah.
And for tax and SEC purposes, things like that, you need to keep that data set for 7 years. So that would be in our case.
So in your case, you may have an issue, but even then, you could go back and look and say, okay, auditor, what's the value of having this data? Or if it's a law that you have to carry, well, I can't help you there, but law trumps PCI. So as long as you're doing it securely or with reasonable, because even if somebody gets 1 tape, I mean, that's one of the things that cracks me up. Like, oh, we lost 1 tape out of a batch of 50 off the back of a FedEx truck. What the hell is that going to get you? It's not going to get you a whole lot. If you don't have everything in the whole tape system, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge. So if that works, it can be a challenge. Does that help? The endearing compensated control discussion. All right, here's a good one. The effing new guy, right? The FNGs, the pimply-faced youth, the PFY that walks in the door, says, I'm ready to do some training, I'm ready to do some assessing. A new assessor, does anybody know what it takes to become an assessor or QSA? What does it take to become a QSA? Training, 3 days of training. $25,000 of cash money approximately here in the US. And signing a document. You gotta have insurance. That's about it, right? The people you send have to be qualified. They have to have 5 years of experience or a certification. But since nobody from the council's here, I can tell you that that's not a barrier. Not even a little bit. So I send somebody to training for 3 days. 3 days of training. So think of it, we're not going to use that analogy. 3 days of training. A new assessee, someone who's being assessed. New employee, I responded to your ad, sir. You need somebody who does PCI. I'll probably help you with that. It's kind of like back in the late 90s. I was hiring for somebody. I said, I need somebody who has Cisco experience. Some guy comes in and said, what's your Cisco experience? Well, there was this router down the hall that crashed every once in a while, and I knew that when it did, I kind of, hit the button. And then the network came back up. Come on. So that's a problem, right? You get people who it's the blind leading the blind. Ensure your assessors are experienced. Dead giveaway. The guy's got a printed copy of the standard, and he's flipping through it furiously while he's talking to you. He's probably pretty new at this. And if the questions don't flow, there's an art to this. You can't walk into an assessment as a QSA and say, all right, requirement 10.2.1 says that you're supposed to do logging all access to cardholder data. And you got the Solaris environment. You're doing that, right? Yeah, I'm doing it. The question should be, explain to me, tell me, show me, how are you logging all access to this data? It's an art. It takes time. All new employees should shadow experienced one. Don't throw somebody out in the fire. That's just not cool, and they're not going to do a good job. And the other one is send employees to merchant training. I don't get paid for saying that, but I'll tell you, there's 2 types of training the council offers. You can go for the training that kind of lets you sit back and go party at night because there's no test at the end, and then there's the one that has the test at the end. And guess what? If you do the one with the test at the end, you can potentially self-certify as a merchant. Do you want to do it? I don't know. That's a question for your people above most of our pay grades in here, right?
And it's a signed executive name and blood.
Yep. Right? Executive has to sign off on it. That's the thing that was like, whoa, wait a minute, we're not going to do that part. All right, here we go. So we have like 5 minutes left.
Okay, perfect. So these are kind of like a few useful reminders, and then we're going to go and spend the rest of the time on Q&A. So this is a self-explanatory slide. Now, I have to show it to whenever I'm talking to merchants or people who are actually from the side of dealing with PCI, thinking of PCI as something to be dealt with today and then forgotten. And Josh had a great example about why do we fear assessor more than a hacker. And I had the exact same story when the security manager would say that hacker is kind of like some unknown probability of bad stuff happening, and the assessor is sitting right on that bench outside of the door, and he's going to come in, and then I have to deal with the PCI stuff. And Chinese hackers are, well, in China, and they might or might not show up here, and even if they do. So this whole thinking leads many companies to just focus on PCI without any connection to anything else. And that leads to sort of, let me put it mildly, a missed opportunity to improve security basically at somebody else's cost, at somebody else's expense, because you don't have to convince, argue, fight. Sometimes you can legitimately request budget and do things that you'd need and that would improve PCI compliance and security. So that's kind of a reminder. And then I had people argue with me about this line, which to me sounds like the least controversial line, security first, compliance as a result. It's not always the case. Not every security measure would render you PCI compliant. That's for sure. But at the same time, security first with some tweaks will give you much simpler compliance. That's the softer and more realistic version. Because I had Andy and some other people argue with that line as an oversimplification. He would do a lot of security and it wouldn't help him with his assessor. In any case...
you skip this one?
Skip it.
Yeah.
Time for conclusions. This is, again, I'm using the line about common sense because this is the audience of security people for whom thinking about not using 3-character passwords, not using the password of password on all the routers is sort of common sense. And this is basically included in PCI. So in that sense, complaining about PCI rarely makes you PCI compliant or secure. So in that sense, it's a useful item to remember. Validation versus continuous compliance is another thing that we mentioned a couple of times. I'd venture to say that we preached it because this is something that will hopefully simplify the breach response and hopefully prevent everybody in the world hating you for not paying attention to PCI and security. And then this whole audit mindset, when I just started doing this, to me it was a big puzzle why good assessors did not like to be called auditors. And then I think it was Branden or somebody else who kind of enlightened me on this one, is that there is really some kind of a deep philosophical difference about why audit implies a hostile relationship and the original vision for the PCI assessors. And remember, QSA stands for security last time I checked. So this type of mindset is more useful for this domain than the let's figure out how to deceive the auditor kind of mindset and get that piece of paper that proves we are compliant. So these are as far as the conclusions go. Any additions to this one? Okay, perfect. Now we got to sell the book again.
Yeah. So we're going to give away a book. We're going to give away a free one. But I'm going to caution you. We're going to ask a question. I'm going to look for the first hand. But don't Jeopardy this thing and sit here and do this thing, because if you miss it, you got to go buy it. That's not my rules. The publisher said that. So you got to go buy it. You can buy one right outside. All right. So for the book, first person, how many days of training are required for a new QSA?
I think
Go, buddy. 3 days. All right. Andrew's got it. Very good.
I have a suspicion.
Keep showing up at these things. I'm going to give you a free one of these times.
Did you start raising your hand before he finished? No. Cheating, reading his thoughts or something? Okay, yeah, congratulations.
Very good. All right, questions?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so my business is in a competitive market, as lots of folks are.
Yep.
I want to do a good job. I want to shop for my QSA the right way and get someone that's going to help me run my business securely, reduce my actual risk,
Yep.
and be compliant in the process.
Yep.
My competitor shops for a QSA on the cheap, buys a bunch of stuff, and now I'm at a disadvantage. I would put
Yep.
it to you,